She's just comfortable. Too easy. She gives and gives, I don't even have to try. That was the first thing I heard when I opened the door that night, the words hung in the air. Sharp and mocking, slicing through the soft hum of rain outside. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. I froze in the doorway, the cold air of Seattle clinging to my wet coat. My hand still held the paper bag of takeout I'd picked up for dinner, Thai food, his favorite, but then I heard his laugh. Ethan's, that easy, confident laugh I used to love. She's sweet, but she's predictable, you know? Always waiting, always giving me space, like some loyal little puppy. Natalie gets me. She's real. My heart stopped out. I didn't know whether to drop the bag or my whole life right there on the floor. The rain outside grew heavier, slapping against the window like a warning. I took a step back, careful not to make a sound. My reflection in the hallway mirror looked pale, ghost-like, as if I'd vanished from my own home. He was in the living room, phone pressed to his ear, pacing slowly. I could hear every word. No, she doesn't suspect a thing. She's too trusting. That's what makes it so easy. Something in me shattered, quietly, completely. For years, I had built my life around this man. Ethan Collins, the man who told me he wanted forever. Who said he loved the way I cared, the way I made every place feel like home now. His voice was cold. Detached. A stranger's voice wearing the skin of the man I once knew. My fingers trembled. The smell of basil chicken filled the air, absurdly normal in that moment of betrayal. I can't believe you said that to her. A woman's voice laughed faintly through the phone. Natalie. I recognized her tone instantly. The coworker I'd convinced myself was just a friend. What? That she's boring? Ethan chuckled. Come on, Nat. I'm with you, aren't I? There it was. The truth. Simple. Brutal. I leaned against the wall, trying to breathe. My heartbeat was too loud, my throat too tight. The apartment, our apartment, suddenly felt foreign, staged, as if I had walked into someone else's life. Rain streaked down the window, and somewhere outside, a siren wailed. I wanted to scream, to burst into the room and throw every memory in his face. But I didn't. I just stood there listening. Dying a little with every word. She keeps talking about buying a house together, Ethan went on, laughing. I mean, God, she really thinks we're that kind of couple. You could tell her, Natalie teased. Nah, he said. Why ruin a good thing? I closed my eyes. That sentence, why ruin a good thing, echoed in my skull. When I finally moved, it wasn't anger that guided me. It was clarity. Cold and cleaned out, I set the takeout bag down quietly on the counter. My keys. My phone. I slipped off my shoes to keep from making noise. My whole body was shaking, but my face felt numb, and then I turned and walked out. The door closed behind me with a soft click, the kind of sound you'd miss unless you were listening for it. He didn't notice. He just kept talking. Outside, the rain poured harder. I stepped into it like stepping into absolution. The wind hit my face, cold and sharp, but it didn't matter. I walked without direction, just away. The streets were empty, glistening under streetlights. Water pooled around my boots. I passed the coffee shop where we had our first date, the corner bookstore where he once said, "You're my favorite kind of quiet." Every memory now tasted bitter. By the time I reached the waterfront, the city was a blur of gray and gold. I stood there, soaked to the bone, staring at my reflection on the slick pavement. This was it. The moment everything I thought I knew collapsed. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through our photos, birthdays, vacations, lazy Sundays. Smiling faces, fake forever. I deleted them all, one by one. A single tear fell. Mixing with the rain. I whispered, barely audible, "You don't get to do this to me anymore." And then I walked away. That night. Under Seattle's endless rain, I didn't just lose him. I lost the version of myself that needed his love to feel whole. By the time I reached Olivia's apartment, my hair was plastered to my face and my fingers had gone numb. The rain had soaked through my coat, through every layer of me, until I couldn't tell where the cold ended and my body began. Olivia opened the door, eyes widening. "Maddie? Oh my God, what happened to you?" I didn't answer. I just stood there, dripping onto her carpet, clutching my purse like it held the last pieces of my life. She didn't ask again. She just pulled me in, wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, and handed me a mug of tea I couldn't even hold steady. It wasn't until I sat on her couch, staring at the steam rising from the cup, that the tears came. Quiet, relentless, unstoppable. I heard him, I whispered finally. He was talking to her. Olivia's expression shifted, shock, anger, then something softer. "Ethan?" I nodded. He said I was pathetic. That I was easy. That I couldn't finish. My throat closed. She sat beside me, her hand firm on mine. "You're not pathetic, Madison. You've loved someone who didn't deserve it. That's all." But it didn't feel like that's all. It felt like my entire world had been built on quicksand, and I had just realized I'd been sinking for years. That night, after Olivia went to bed, I sat by the window watching the rain bead down the glass. Seattle was a blur of reflected lights, the kind of city that never stopped moving, even when your world did. I thought about how it had all started. 4 years ago, I met Ethan at a design expo downtown. I had been presenting my first solo project, a minimalist apartment renovation, nervous and hopeful. He'd come by my booth, asked questions about textures and lighting, pretending to care about architecture when he clearly didn't. What he did care about was me. Or so I thought. He was charming, confident, with that kind of easy smile that disarmed people. I remember thinking how lucky I was that someone like him noticed someone like me, quiet, methodical, never the loudest in the room. It began with coffee dates, weekend hikes, spontaneous road trips. He made me laugh. He made me feel seen. I used to tell Olivia, he's the kind of man who'll never hurt me. I almost laugh thinking about it now. Over time, the relationship became routine, comfortable, predictable. He'd work late. I'd leave dinner on the table. On weekends, he'd plan things, and I'd follow. My dreams shrank quietly to fit his schedule. When he got promoted last year, I threw a dinner party to celebrate. I spent the whole day cooking, decorating, making everything perfect. He walked in, kissed my forehead, and said, "You didn't have to go through all this trouble." But the truth was, I did. Because loving Ethan meant proving my worth over and over again. I had built a life around him, a life of soft compromises. A life of waiting. Now, sitting in Olivia's apartment with rain hammering the windows, I realized how much of myself I had given away. The next morning, my phone buzzed with missed calls, 12 from Ethan. I turned it face down. Then came the messages, "Maddie, please call me. I'm worried, where are you? Let's talk, please." I can explain. Explain what? That I wasn't exciting enough? That I'd been convenient? I deleted the messages, but each one left a bruise somewhere deep inside. When I finally went out that afternoon, the city was gray and heavy. I stopped by my office, a small studio on the third floor of an old brick building downtown. The plants on my desk were wilted, the coffee mug still stained from the morning before everything broke. No one knew what had happened. My coworker smiled, unaware. The world had moved on, as it always does. I sat at my drafting table and opened my sketchbook. Blank pages stared back at me. I tried to draw, but my hand refused to move. It was as if my creativity had been tied to him too, and now, with him gone, I couldn't find my rhythm. I pressed my pencil against the paper and drew a single line. It wavered. Then another. Slowly, a shape began to form, an outline of a window, rain streaking down the glass. When I finished, I realized it wasn't just a window. It was me. A reflection blurred by the storm. That night, Olivia made pasta and poured wine. She talked about work, about her cat, about anything to distract me. I appreciated it, even though I barely responded. At one point, she said, "You'll get through this. You always do." I wanted to believe her. But a voice in my head whispered, "What if this time I don't?" Later, as I lay in bed, I scrolled through old texts from Ethan. "You're my home, Maddie. No one gets me the way you do, promise me we'll never change." I laughed, not bitterly, but hollowly. We had already changed. I just hadn't noticed until it was too late. The following week blurred into gray sameness, work, rain, sleepless nights. Seattle had a way of matching your mood. The drizzle felt endless, like the city was mourning with you. One evening, Olivia found me sitting on the balcony, wrapped in a blanket. She handed me a cup of cocoa and said, "You can't keep replaying it, you know." "I keep thinking," I said quietly, "how many times he looked at me and lied without blinking." She sighed. "That's his reflection to carry, not yours." But it didn't feel that way. The betrayal clung to me like the humidity in the air, invisible but everywhere. It wasn't until the third week that something inside me began to shift. I was walking home from work when the rain stopped for the first time in days. The sky cleared just enough to let a sliver of sunlight through, turning the wet streets into mirrors. I caught my reflection in one of the puddles, tired eyes, messy hair, but still standing. Still here, and for the first time since that night, I thought, maybe this isn't the end. Maybe it's just the undoing before the rebuild. I didn't know what my life would look like without Ethan in it. But I was ready to find out. The rain had returned, soft at first, then steady, the kind of Seattle rain that never really stops, just changes rhythm. I stood outside the building that had been my home for 4 years, staring at the faint glow of our apartment window on the third floor. Ethan was out of town for a client dinner. I'd checked. It was the only reason I dared come back. Inside, everything smelled the same: cedar candle, his cologne, faint traces of coffee. It was almost cruel how familiar it all felt. I walked through the living room slowly, as if moving through someone else's memories. The couch where we'd watched movies. The rug I picked out. The photo of us from Portland, still smiling in its frame. I wondered when I'd started smiling for the camera instead of for him. I didn't cry. I'd already done enough of that. Instead, I grabbed a suitcase and began packing. One drawer. Then another. Every sweater folded felt like closing a chapter. Every object placed in the bag felt like reclaiming space in my own life. When I reached the closet, I hesitated. His jackets hung neatly on one side, tailored, sharp, organized. My clothes were soft, neutral, gentle. Even our wardrobe had been a metaphor. On the top shelf sat a small box I hadn't touched in months. Inside were letters, cards, little notes Ethan used to leave me. Miss you already? Dinner at 7. You're my favorite person. I read one, and felt nothing. That's when I knew I was done. I found a blank sheet of paper on his desk and sat down to write. My hand trembled for a moment before finding its rhythm. Ethan, you won't understand this right away, and that's okay. I'm not leaving out of anger. I'm leaving because I finally see what we became. A pattern. A habit. Something safe that stopped being real. You once told me love should feel effortless. I believed you. But love isn't effortless, Ethan. It's a choice, one you stopped making a long time ago. I wish you peace, truly. But I need to find mine elsewhere. Madison. The words looked fragile on the page, but they carried a strange finality. I folded the letter and placed it on the kitchen counter beside the keys. Before leaving, I turned off the lights and stood in the doorway one last time. The silence was heavy, almost sacred. I whispered to the empty room, "Goodbye, Madison Blake from apartment 3C." Then I closed the door. The hallway light flickered as I descended the stairs. My suitcase wheels clicked softly against the tile. The rain outside welcomed me like an old friend, cold, relentless, cleansing. I didn't call a cab. I just walked, the suitcase bumping behind me, the city humming quietly around me. Neon reflections shimmered on the wet pavement. Somewhere, a musician played a lonely saxophone. Every step away from that building felt like shedding another layer of my old self. By the time I reached the pier, the wind had picked up. I stopped under an awning, watching the water churn against the docks. My phone buzzed, Ethan's name flashing on the screen. For a second, instinct made me reach for it. Then I let it ring until the light dimmed. I didn't owe him an explanation. Not anymore. 2 days later, Ethan realized I was gone. Olivia told me he came to her apartment looking half crazed. Rain dripping from his hair, eyes wild. She left you a letter, she'd said. Handing it to him. He'd unfolded it. Read it in silence, then asked, where is she? Olivia only shrugged. Somewhere she can breathe. He'd stood there for a long moment. His jaw clenched, before storming out into the rain again, while he searched. I stayed quiet. I rented a small studio on the edge of Capitol Hill, one room. A tiny kitchen, a window that overlooked an alley. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The first night there, I sat on the floor eating instant noodles, listening to the rain on the roof. I should have felt lonely. Instead, I felt still. I had nothing figured out, no plan, no certainty. But for the first time in years, I didn't have to perform. I didn't have to smile when I wanted to scream. I didn't have to wait for someone to choose me. On the third day, Ethan called again. This time, I picked up, not to reconcile, but to end it properly. Maddie, he said, voice cracking. Please, can we talk? I made a mistake. I can fix this. I closed my eyes. The sound of his voice no longer hurt, it only echoed. There's nothing to fix, I said quietly. You broke something that can't be glued back together. He didn't respond. Just silence. I could hear him breathing, the same rhythm I used to match when we slept. Goodbye, Ethan, I said, then I hung up. That night, the rain returned again, a familiar lullaby over the city. I stood by the window, watching the streetlights blur into gold ribbons somewhere. Ethan was probably staring at the same storm, wondering when everything fell apart, but I wasn't his anymore. As the thunder rolled in the distance, I whispered to the night, you don't get to define me. And for the first time since it all began, I meant it. He ran a hand through his soaked hair. Natalie meant nothing. It was a stupid mistake. I panicked. You didn't think I'd find out, I said. He flinched like I'd slapped him. Please, Maddie. Just come home. We can fix this. You don't get to do this now, I said quietly. He froze. Do what? Show up in the rain and pretend it's love. The silence between us stretched. Rain drummed against the windows, steady, merciless. He pulled something from his pocket, a small velvet box. Maddie, I was going to do this differently, he said, voice trembling. But I can't lose you. He dropped to one knee. Right there, on Olivia's living room rug, dripping water onto the floor. I stared at him, at the box, the ring, the absurdity of it all. Don't, I whispered. Please, he said. Marry me. Let me prove I can be better. I shook my head. You don't propose because you're guilty, Ethan. You propose because you love someone enough to grow. You're not there. He looked up at me, eyes glassy. I'll do anything. No, I said, stepping back. You'll say that until the next Natalie shows up. And I'll end up here again, trying to believe you. He reached for my hand. I pulled away. You taught me something, Ethan, I said softly. Love isn't about saving someone. It's about knowing when to save yourself. He stood, shoulders shaking. You're really walking away? I already did. He didn't answer. Just stood there, drenched and silent, watching as I walked past him toward the door. Olivia didn't say a word. She just handed me an umbrella. I stepped outside into the downpour, leaving Ethan behind in the doorway, a silhouette of regret. The city swallowed me whole again, the sound of tires hissing through puddles. The glow of neon against wet asphalt. I walked until my legs ached, until the rain felt like baptism. The next day, I went back to work. It wasn't easy. My focus was fractured, but I forced myself to show up. To create. To try. 2 weeks later, my boss sent me to a design conference downtown. I almost didn't go. Crowds exhausted me, and small talk felt impossible. But something in me said go anyway. That's where I saw him, Lucas Harrington. It took me a second to recognize him. He'd changed since college, broader shoulders, calmer eyes. He was talking to someone near the coffee stand when he noticed me. His smile was warm, immediate. Madison Blake? He said, walking over. Wow, it's been, 8 years? Something like that, I said, managing a small smile. He laughed softly. You still hate these things, don't you? I do. He handed me a cup of coffee. Then let's hate it together. We sat at a corner table, away from the noise. Conversation came easy, the way it only does with people who once knew you before life complicated everything. He told me about his architecture firm in Portland, about how he was in town for a project. I told him about my studio, about trying to rebuild after. Everything. He didn't pry. Didn't ask for details. Just listened, and for the first time in months, I felt seen, not as someone broken, not as someone to fix, but as myself. When the conference ended, he walked me to the parking lot. Rain had started again, softer this time. You always did love the rain, he said, smiling. I used to, I said. Now I'm learning to live with it. He nodded. That's a start. Before we parted, he slipped his card into my hand. If you ever need to talk, about work or, life. I tucked it into my coat pocket. Thank you. As I drove home, I caught myself humming, quietly, absent-mindedly. It startled me. I hadn't realized I still could. A week later, Ethan showed up again, this time outside Olivia's building, shouting my name. He was angry, accusing. Who is he, Maddie? He yelled. The guy from the conference? Are you serious already? Before I could answer, another voice cut through the rain. Back off, Ethan. Lucas stepped forward from the shadows of the entryway. He must have been dropping something off, a design file, coffee, fate maybe. Ethan's eyes widened. You've got to be kidding me. Leave, Lucas said, calm but firm. Ethan lunged forward, shoving past him, but Lucas caught his arm, his voice low and even. Don't make me call the cops. Ethan glared at me one last time, rain streaking down his face, then turned and stormed away. When he was gone, Lucas looked at me. You okay? I nodded, trembling. I am now. He smiled, the kind that reached his eyes. Good. And just like that, the storm finally began to quiet, both outside, and somewhere deep inside me. It was the kind of rain Seattle was famous for, relentless, heavy, almost personal. The kind that didn't fall on you so much as through you. I was standing by the window in Olivia's apartment, sketching half-heartedly, when I saw him, Ethan, soaked, disheveled, standing on the sidewalk below with an umbrella hanging uselessly at his side. He was looking up, scanning the windows like he wasn't sure which one was mine. When his eyes found me, my stomach twisted. I hadn't seen him in weeks. Olivia was in the kitchen when the doorbell rang. I didn't move. Don't answer it, I said quietly. She peeked through the peephole, sighed. He's drenched, Maddie. I don't care. But she opened the door anyway. Olivia never could stand awkward silence. Ethan stepped inside, dripping onto the floor, breathless. His eyes landed on me instantly. Maddie. His voice cracked. You look, don't. I cut him off. Whatever you're about to say, don't. He looked smaller somehow, shoulders slumped, eyes ringed with exhaustion. The arrogance I once mistook for confidence was gone. What replaced it was desperation. I can't sleep. I can't think. He took a step closer. Please, talk to me. There's nothing to talk about. I made a mistake, okay? I screwed up, but I love you. You know that. I laughed, sharp, humorless. You love me? You love the woman you called pathetic? His face tightened. You weren't supposed to hear that. That doesn't make it better. For the first time in months, the rain had stopped. The city glowed, not with sunlight exactly, but with that gray gold light Seattle gets on its best days. When the clouds seemed to forgive you for existing, Madison Blake was learning to breathe again. Lucas had become a quiet, steady presence in her life, not the kind that demanded space, but the kind that offered it freely. He'd text her in the mornings, drop by with coffee between meetings, and sometimes sit beside her in comfortable silence while she worked late. There were no grand gestures, no promises carved out of fear. Just patience, and that patience felt like peace. One evening, after wrapping up a client project, Lucas showed up at her studio. "Dinner?" he asked. She smiled. "Only if you're driving." They ended up at a small Italian restaurant near the water, candlelight flickering, rain tapping lightly on the windows. Madison couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed that much. The sound surprised her. Lucas noticed. "You're glowing," he said, almost teasing. "It's the wine," she said. "No," he replied. "It's you. You're starting to come back." And she realized he was right. By early spring, their connection had deepened into something neither had dared define. Madison wasn't sure if it was love yet, but it was kind, real, unhurried. When Lucas invited her to a design retreat at a resort just outside the city, she hesitated. "It's mostly business," he explained. "Workshops, panels, endless small talk. But I thought it might be good for you to meet people." She finally agreed. A weekend away couldn't hurt. The resort was beautiful, all glass and wood and endless green. Madison felt lighter the moment she arrived, like the city's gray fog had finally lifted. The first day passed in a blur of networking events, design showcases, and too much coffee. Lucas was busy most of the afternoon, meeting clients. Madison spent time by the lake, sketching. Watching ducks ripple the water, she felt calm, the kind of calm that comes when you start to believe maybe, just maybe, life has stopped punishing you. That illusion broke the next morning. She was walking back from breakfast when she saw him, Lucas, standing by the terrace, laughing with a woman. She was tall, elegant, in a crimson blazer that caught the morning light. Madison slowed her steps, the paper cup of coffee trembling in her hand. The woman touched Lucas's arm lightly, too lightly to be casual. He didn't move away. They talked, smiling, like old lovers sharing a secret. Madison couldn't breathe. Every memory she had of Ethan's betrayal slammed back into her. The late-night calls, the excuses, the same easy laughter he'd once shared with Natalie. Not again, she thought. Please, not again. She stood there for a moment too long, then turned and walked away before either of them could see her. She spent the rest of the retreat avoiding him, ignoring his messages, pretending she'd caught a cold. When he knocked on her door that night, she didn't answer. By the time the weekend ended, she'd packed early and left without saying goodbye. Lucas called, texted, "Are you okay? Did I do something wrong?" She never replied. When Olivia asked what happened, Madison just said, "I was stupid. I let myself believe again." The days after that blurred into gray. She threw herself into work, back-to-back projects, late nights, coffee instead of meals. Anything to keep from thinking. But the silence between the sound of rain grew unbearable. One night, as she was cleaning her kitchen, she caught her reflection in the window. Pale, hollow-eyed. "You really thought it'd be different," she whispered to herself. She sank to the floor and cried, the kind of crying that has no sound, just shaking shoulders and silent air. By the time the tears stopped, something inside her had hardened. No more men. No more promises. No more waiting for someone to prove her worth. 2 weeks later, she missed her period. At first, she brushed it off, stress, exhaustion, the universe playing tricks. But when the second week passed, and then the third, she knew. Standing in the small bathroom of her apartment, Madison stared at the pregnancy test on the sink. The second line was faint but undeniable. Her heart pounded. Her breath hitched. "Please don't," she whispered, as if begging the universe to change its mind. But the line didn't fade. She sank to the edge of the bathtub, hand over her mouth. The world tilted around her. Lucas. It was the last time they'd been together, before the retreat. Before everything fell apart, she remembered the warmth of his hand on her cheek. The way he'd whispered, "You deserve to be loved, right?" And now, this. She didn't call him. Didn't tell anyone, not even Olivia. Instead, she took a long walk through the city. The drizzle returned, soft but steady. People passed her with umbrellas, couples laughing, children splashing through puddles. Everything looked the same. But for her, everything had changed. She wasn't sure what she felt: fear, anger, disbelief, maybe all of them at once. When she stopped by the waterfront, she placed a hand on her stomach, whispering to the tiny life growing inside her. "I don't know what we're going to do," she said softly, "but I promise we'll figure it out." The words felt foreign, but also grounding. That night, lying in bed, she imagined 2 futures, one where she told Lucas, and one where she didn't. In the first, he apologized, explained, said it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe he was telling the truth. Maybe he wasn't. In the second, she didn't need him at all. For the first time in her life, Madison considered what it meant to live entirely for herself, not as someone's girlfriend, not as someone's disappointment, but as someone's mother. The thought scared her. But it also lit something small and fierce inside her chest. Maybe this was her second chance, not at love, but at life. The first sound Madison heard that morning was the rain, soft, steady, the same rhythm it had always been. But something inside her had changed. The test on her nightstand was no longer a symbol of fear. It was a heartbeat waiting to happen. She was going to keep the baby. No dramatic announcement, no second thoughts. Just a quiet certainty that this was her choice. The following days passed in slow, careful motion. Madison stopped checking her phone for messages that never came. She made appointments, read parenting books, learned what vitamins she needed, what foods to avoid. Her life became smaller, simpler, almost monastic, but for once, it belonged entirely to her. The city didn't change, but the way she saw it did. The sound of traffic outside her window no longer felt lonely. It felt alive. The rain on the roof no longer echoed sadness. It sounded like protection. She took long walks in the park, one hand resting over her stomach. Sometimes, she'd whisper to the baby, "It's just you and me now." And somehow, that was enough. Meanwhile, Ethan Collins's perfect life was falling apart. Word spread fast in Seattle's marketing circle. Natalie had miscarried, a quiet tragedy whispered in office corridors. Then came the scandal, a leaked email thread revealing his manipulation of clients. His arrogance toward coworkers. By the end of the month, he was out of a job. Madison didn't know the details, but she heard fragments through mutual friends. He's drinking too much, he's not taking calls, he looks lost. Once upon a time, that would have broken her heart. Now, it barely registered. She didn't want revenge. She didn't need to see him fall to feel free. Freedom was already hers then. One gray afternoon in early June, there was a knock on her door. When she opened it, Lucas was standing there, rain in his hair, worry in his eyes. "Hey," he said quietly. Madison's heart stuttered. She hadn't seen him since the retreat. Part of her had imagined this moment, the apology, the explanations, but now that it was real, she felt strangely calm. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "I needed to see you," he said. "You disappeared, and I couldn't stop thinking about what went wrong." Madison crossed her arms, wary. "You really want me to tell you?" He nodded. "I saw you with her," she said flatly. "Valeria. You looked close." Realization flashed across his face, then frustration. God. I should have known she'd pull something like that. "What are you talking about?" He ran a hand through his hair, sighing. "She's a contractor I was negotiating with. She wanted my firm's deal on a development project. When I told her I wasn't interested in mixing business and pleasure, she got angry. That morning, she cornered me in the lobby and tried to make it look like something it wasn't." Madison stayed silent. He continued, voice low. "She even sent me an email later. Said, 'Hope your girlfriend liked the show.' I thought it was just ego. I didn't realize it would cost me you." The sincerity in his tone unsettled her, not because she doubted it, but because she wanted to believe it so badly. "Lucas," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't know what to believe anymore. Every time I think I found something real, it cracks open and breaks." He stepped closer, carefully. "Then don't believe me yet. Just let me show you." She met his gaze. His eyes were steady, the kind that didn't hide behind charm or excuses. "I believe you," she said finally. Then, after a pause, added softly, "But I need to believe in myself first." He nodded slowly, no protest, no defense. "Then I'll wait." Something about the way he said it made her chest ache, not from pain, but from relief. The weeks after that unfolded quietly. Lucas didn't push. He sent messages now and then, not of longing, but of care. "Do you need groceries? Have you eaten?" He repaired a leaking pipe under her sink one Saturday, then left without asking to stay. He was there, without trying to take over. Madison kept to her own rhythm. She attended doctor appointments alone, learned to breathe through fear. Started designing nurseries in her spare time, soft shades of sage and cream. Wooden cribs, sunlight imagined through lace curtains. One evening, as she painted a small canvas for the baby's room, a window overlooking a field of rain, she thought about everything that had brought her here. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the storms. It had all led her to this moment. Peace. Quiet, independence. Sometimes, when she walked through the city, she saw women pushing strollers, couples laughing, people hurrying through their own storms. She didn't envy them. Her happiness wasn't loud or romantic anymore. It was steady, like the heartbeat she now carried within her. Ethan's name never passed her lips again. His ghost had faded into the noise of distant rain, and as for Lucas, he remained, a constant shadow of kindness. Never pressing, never asking. Just there. On the night of her 7th month, he stopped by to drop off groceries. The rain was heavier than usual, thunder rumbling softly in the distance. "Do you ever get tired of the rain?" he asked, handing her a carton of milk. She smiled faintly. "No. I think I finally made peace with it." He looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, "I'm proud of you." She blinked, surprised. "For what?" "For choosing yourself." The words sank deep. After he left, Madison sat by the window, watching the rain trail down the glass. Her reflection looked different now, not fragile, not afraid. Just strong. She placed her hand gently over her stomach and whispered, "We're going to be okay." And for the first time, she truly believed it. The first thing she noticed that morning was the silence, rare in Seattle, almost sacred. The rain had paused, leaving the world washed and still. Outside her window, the city shimmered under a pale gray sky, fragile as glass. Madison sat on the couch, one hand resting on the swell of her belly. 8 months now. The baby kicked gently, as if reminding her, "I'm here," she smiled. "I know, sweetheart. I know." The apartment smelled faintly of lavender and paint. Half-finished sketches were scattered across the table, nursery designs, soft colors, light spaces. She had turned her pain into art, her loneliness into creation. Every brushstroke was a quiet declaration. "I survived." Lucas came by around noon, knocking softly before letting himself in. "Hey," he said, setting down a paper bag. "Soup, bread, and decaf coffee, doctor approved." Madison laughed. "You're starting to sound like my mother." "Then I must be doing something right," he said. Smiling, they talked about simple things, his new project, her cravings, the way Seattle's rain had been relentless lately. There was no tension anymore, no unspoken questions. Just comfort. Before leaving, Lucas paused by the door. "If you need me, call anytime." "I mean it." "I know," she said. "But I'm okay." He studied her for a moment. "You really are, aren't you?" She nodded. "For the first time." And he left, smiling, like a man who knew patience could be its own kind of love. That evening, the rain returned, not the furious kind that consumed the city, but a gentle, rhythmic drizzle that sounded like a lullaby. Madison stood by the window, watching it beat along the glass, the city lights blurred into halos, reflections trembling across wet streets. It was beautiful, in that melancholy way only Seattle could be. She thought of Ethan, briefly, distantly. Wondered where he was, if he ever thought about her, about what he'd thrown away. But the thought held no anger anymore, no ache. Only silence. People change. Some grow. Others collapse. She whispered to the rain, "I hope you found peace, Ethan." Then she turned away. Weeks passed. The nursery was ready, soft greens, pale cream, a rocking chair by the window. A place built not from perfection, but from forgiveness. On the night she went into labor, the rain came harder than it had in months. Olivia drove her to the hospital, Lucas following close behind. The drive was long, the city a blur of lights and thunder. Hours later, as the storm raged outside, Madison held her baby for the first time, a tiny girl with dark hair and quiet eyes. The nurse smiled. "She's perfect." Madison stared at her daughter, tears filling her eyes. "Hi there," she whispered. "Welcome to the world." The baby opened her eyes, calm, curious, and in that instant, everything shifted. Madison felt something she hadn't felt in years, wholeness. Lucas knocked on the hospital room door the next morning, carrying flowers. He hesitated in the doorway, unsure if he belonged there. "You can come in," she said softly. He approached, looking at the baby with wonder. "She's beautiful." "She is," Madison said, smiling. "And loud when she wants to be." He laughed quietly. "She gets that from you." They stood in silence for a while, watching the baby sleep. Then Madison turned to him. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not walking away. For not trying to fix me. Just staying." Lucas's voice was gentle. "You never needed fixing, Maddie. You just needed to remember who you are." She swallowed hard, emotions tightening her throat. "I think I finally do." 2 weeks later, Madison brought her daughter home. The city was still gray, but softer somehow, like the clouds had learned mercy. She named the baby Isla Rain Blake, because rain had always been there, in heartbreak. In endings, in beginnings. One evening, Madison sat on the porch, Isla asleep in her arms. The sky was heavy with clouds, the air cool and damp. Lucas arrived quietly, holding a small blue umbrella. "You'll catch a cold," he teased. Draping his jacket over her shoulders. "I like the rain," she said. Smiling, "I know you do." They sat together, no words needed. Just the sound of rain falling gently around them, not a storm anymore, but a song. Madison looked down at her daughter, then at the man beside her. Everything she'd lost had led her here. Every heartbreak had carved space for this peace. When the clouds finally broke and a pale beam of sunlight cut through the mist, Madison whispered, almost to herself, "I think the rain finally set me free." Lucas looked at her. "What's that?" She shook her head, smiling through tears. "Nothing. Just gratitude." He smiled back, eyes soft. "Then you've found it." And as the rain slowed, the world seemed to exhale, leaving behind only quiet, and the steady rhythm of a new beginning.